It's so hard to say goodbye. Up next on Geek Gotta Say. And welcome back to Geek Gotta Say. It's Friday and we're having fun. And it's so hard to say goodbye to some of our favorite TV shows
And characters.
and characters.
So we came up with this because we've actually been watching The Good Place.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we went to go watch it last night and didn't realize that it was already time for the
Yeah,
series finale.
I looked it up because we were watching it. I was, is this the last one? And we looked it up, and then it's like a series finale. I was like, it's not even a season finale. It's a series finale.
I know. We were like, wait, what happened?
No.
I'm like, why are they all going through the door? Like, what's going on?
So we may have freaked you out. Let's see what we're talking about. We're not talking about Kobe either. So.
I mean, I could, but people aren't going to like what I have to say, so maybe we just won't. We'll just get away from that. I'll be good, and we'll just move on. So one of the things that I liked about the Good Place ending...
My mic's off.
No, your mic's not off.
Is your mic on?
Well, here was super low.
I was super low.
No, it's just
No.
ear.
Oh.
It's just full girl. He needs to turn his computer up.
Mm-hmm.
Take it off mute.
Okay. What was I saying? You get distracted so easily, and then you distract me.
Well, yeah. So, well, we have Fulgor saying, hey, guys.
Hey.
We also have True Robotech. Vince's mic is off. And audio is super low for me. Might just be my computer, though. And Steve Cuneo says, I just thought the goodbye was for the show. I'm so glad it's not the end of it. Pop Culture Geekery says, wait, goodbye? What's happening now?
So we're saying goodbye. We're talking about shows that we've had to say goodbye to too soon. Although I will say...
But not just shows, too.
But characters.
Even like characters or like even like movie trilogies that we won't get to see anymore.
Yeah. So all of those things. So the nice thing about The Good Place, that was what we kind of started with, was that it ended when it was ready to end. And we got a resolution to it, which is nice.
Which it wasn't like Heroes.
Right.
That was a horrible ending. They tried to bring it back, and it was a horrible comeback.
No, yeah. I mean, it was chugging along really great. It hadn't kind of come to fruition. I could see where The Good Place was done, because there's only so much storyline you have in that kind of story anyway.
Right.
And so to see them say, you know, we know what this story is going to be. We know where it's going to end. For us as the viewer to get the ending, to get to see that finality of it, and to say goodbye to those characters, I thought it was great.
I think it really did it justice.
Mm-hmm.
Really
but
did
then
it justice.
I would agree with you for Heroes. So Heroes is one of those that it was hard to say goodbye to, because it was rolling around really well, and we... to me, it felt like we were only halfway through the story.
Yeah, Steve says, this is why I have abandonment issues.
For real. So yeah, we felt like we were only partway through the story, so I think enough people complained that then they were like, oh, well, we're going to slap an ending together. But because we were kind of halfway through the story...
Ending was like horrible.
The ending was awful. It was terrible. So then you just end up feeling kind of robbed of the whole experience, in my opinion. So I don't know. But then I think there are...
And it's just really bad that for Heroes, that was because, like you said, it was because of the writer's strike.
Mm-hmm.
And you would think they would come back with good stuff, and they came back with junk.
Yeah, it was terrible. I don't know if they were still angry about what was going on or what the deal was, but... and then I think some of the shows, the problem is that there are some of us as viewers who don't want to let it go.
Yeah.
And it probably has come to the point where, I don't know if people that are not our age know this terminology, but we call it jumping the shark. And it has to do with Happy Days. Like in Happy Days, when Happy Days had gone too far, and then they had Fonzie like jump a shark with a speed, what do you call those things? A jet ski. So the term came from Happy Days from like a long time ago, even before
but
us.
I never
really
used that. I never ever used that.
Well, so that's.
But also, Lennon from Lennon's Kitchen
Hi, Lennon.
says, "Me and Nihar say hi. Hey, how's it going? Thanks for watching."
So, some shows I think jump the shark, but you can't let go of them as the viewer, and so you want to keep them going. Like I think Buffy probably should have ended maybe a little sooner than it did, and we got kind of a campy ending. But I personally, and I know my dad, we wanted Buffy to kind of keep going.
Right.
So I think that there are two sides to that coin of shows ending too soon.
But you talked about Buffy. So what did you think about Angel?
So I felt like Angel wasn't done. I thought that
But what did you think of their ending? How they ended?
Well, I must not
They ended like going after like some demons and going to fight them, and that's how it ended.
Yeah. So I must not have liked it because, to be honest, I don't even remember it. So I must have felt like let down by it because I don't even remember it.
Were you let down because you wanted to go on, or were you let down because it was a crappy last season?
Yeah, maybe a combination of both.
I don't think that it was a bad season.
No? I don't remember. Come to think of it.
I don't think it was.
I'd have to go back and watch it and see. Because I felt like they were at the point where they were just kind of like ramping up in the story and getting to a good place, and we were getting to know all the characters, and they were kind of working well together, and then they were kind of like, meh. That happens a lot with anything that Josh Whedon does. I don't know why they don't like him. Because he always has like this cult following. Yeah. Like I know one of the ones that people are always mad about is Firefly. Like people are always angry about Firefly. Now I've got to be honest here. I've never watched Firefly, the show. Like I've never seen the show. Loved the movie that you had me watch. Thought the movie was great, but I've never seen the show. So I don't know where it was in its story arc, but people.
Yeah, the show was great.
Like.
Steve says Nathan Fillion still puts in jabs about Firefly, the Firefly ending in every show or movie he's in.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I know that's one of the biggest one that when people are talking about this.
To it in Castle.
Yeah.
All the time. Yeah.
Were you gonna say something?
No, I was gonna say a lot of TV shows now, they suffer because most of the TV networks want to make money on these TV shows, so they push really hard to get to that 80, 100 show length, because once you get to the 80, 100, then you can go into syndication. If you don't have that many episodes, you don't go into syndication. So it's a lot harder for you to get picked up. So that's why a lot of shows go to 100, and then it's like, we end.
We're done, and now we're done.
Because that's enough to go into syndication, a year-long syndication to play one day every day.
Well, and I wonder if shows ending mean the same thing to people anymore that they used to mean to us. Because so many of the shows now are available on Netflix and Hulu and stuff, so you can just go back and rewatch them, and rewatch them, and rewatch them, you know, and skip the ones that you didn't like or whatever. So I wonder if, I don't think it's the same impact to people as it used to be to us when we didn't have Netflix.
Right.
Like, I remember when I was younger, I loved Quantum Leap. Quantum Leap was one of my all-time favorite shows. And I probably could have watched that show for, I don't know, 100 seasons, it felt like. And there was so many different stories they could have done.
Right.
And I think Quantum Leap ended after only like 5 or 6 seasons.
Yeah.
And again...
3, I think.
3 seasons.
Oh, really?
3 or 4.
And again, I felt like the story wasn't over. I don't remember the ending being...
He just keeps leaping.
He just, yeah.
That's all that happens. Nothing gets resolved with him. He never comes out of it. He just keeps leaping.
Yeah.
5 seasons.
5, yeah.
97 episodes.
3 short of that 100 mark.
Yeah. Wow. And I think Quantum Leap, it failed because they were running out of budget.
Oh, maybe.
So they kept cutting the budget back. That's why Al wasn't disappearing. He was just walking off screen. And they just make the noise.
Well, the other day I was talking to Colleen about the show
That's
that I
me.
used to watch back in the day. Automan. Do you remember Automan?
I think so.
With Desi Arnaz Jr. And it was like the coolest show.
Never
It was
heard of
like
this thing.
It was like a computer generated superhero. And he would drive this car that would make turns at 90 degrees. Like
Never.
the
I've
car
like
would
never
like
heard
bend
of it.
at 90 degrees.
I never heard of this ever.
And that didn't go for a long time at all.
Well, probably because it was lame.
But it was really good.
It was probably lame.
I liked it as a kid.
Well,
But
you were a
even
kid,
like
so.
Knight Rider, I was big into Knight Rider, and then when that ended, I was like, "Are you kidding me?" But then they came out with Knight Rider 2000, and then
That was terrible, and then
even
you were
though
like, "Oh,
a
now
lot of
I'm
it
over."
was filmed here in San Antonio.
Yeah, but then they came out with Team Knight Rider, which was even worse.
That was pretty bad. I like what the vehicles did, but it just wasn't the same. It wasn't the same as Kit.
No.
It never was.
And then there are certain shows I'm really, even though I'm a geek, I'm also like really into doctor shows. So then I know some people are like, oh, some of these doctor shows just need to end already. And I want them to keep going. I probably could still be watching ER to this day. I could still be watching ER to this day. They could bring the doctors back and stuff. But that ER makes me think of, and Grey's Anatomy then makes me think of characters that have died that had like a really big impact on me. Like I cried when they died in the show. And it's funny because people are always giving me a hard time because I say, oh, I don't want to meet actors or whatever, I don't care about them or whatever, because humans tend to let you down, but imaginary characters don't let you down. Like if you like them, and that's who they are as an imaginary character. I don't want to meet them as a human being because they're probably going to let me down and I'm not going to like them in real life. So I just like their character. I like these imaginary characters that don't let me down.
Well, like in This Is Us, like you wonder.
Right. I don't want to know what they're like because the chemistry is so good and I like them as the triplets. I don't want to know. Like, I don't want to know what they are like. That's why I hate this new trend of the like Talking Dead and all of those things. It's like every freaking show now, after the end of them, you have to hear from the actors and stuff. I don't want to hear you talk. Okay? I don't want to know your opinion. I don't know. I just like.
Even though she wanted to hear the actors.
I just wanted to hear it for a couple of minutes. I only heard it for a couple of minutes because I wanted to know what their real life voices were like.
Yeah, Steve says Scrubs was a fantastic TV show.
Scrubs
that
was
really
a fantastic.
Yes, it was. Very funny.
But like Mark Green, when he died in ER, just devastated me. I was so crushed. In Grey's Anatomy, when George dies, I was crushed. Mm-hmm. People may not know that Negan from The Walking Dead was Denny Crane on Grey's Anatomy. Crushed. The Kara's sister, Danvers, in Supergirl.
Mm-hmm.
She was Lexi Gray in Grey's Anatomy. Crushed when she died. I mean, that whole like crash scene was terrible. Was traumatic. Yeah. Like totally traumatic. And to watch these people die. I think another show that does really good with like traumatizing us with death is The Walking Dead. Mm-hmm. Like, you get to love these characters, and then... No? Stuart, you disagree?
I want them all to die.
You want them all to die. Stuart doesn't know what he's talking about. Like, when...
God. Well, you're The Walking Dead.
I want them all to die. I do want them all to die. I'm like, eat them.
That's the best show for that, because you hate them so much.
You hate them so much, you just want them to die. But no, The Walking Dead, when Glenn gets his head smashed in, okay, that was hard. That was hard.
But even before that, when they think he was like eaten.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they tricked us with that a couple of times.
Yeah, that was a season finale that.
I liked it a lot of the times on that they end on like somebody's death or whatever. Herschel's death really bothered me.
Oh yeah.
Herschel's death really bothered me. Who else? There was a few that died that I was like, meh. But there were a few that it really hits you for a couple of days. You're like, oh man, those people died. That's not.
But you invest
sad.
yourself so much in these characters, and you love these characters. Like, if Daryl, the character Daryl, were to die, people would go crazy.
Yeah, people would go nuts. Yeah.
Big time. I mean, Andrew Lincoln is a big part of The Walking Dead, and I don't know if he's actually dead now, but it's he isn't
He
dead.
got picked up. He's not dead, but they haven't shown him to us in a really long time because what they're saying is they're making a movie, a full-length movie, and it's going to be apparently have that story arc in it. So we'll see how that goes. What about in Star Wars? So are there any Star Wars characters that like it just like kind of really hit you when they died?
Han like really got me when he died.
No, he just phoned it in and nobody cared.
I thought people cared. A lot of people cared.
I think he's a really good actor, even though he doesn't really care.
But that's, again, I don't want to know him as a human being.
Yeah.
I just want to go in there and pretend like he's Han Solo. I don't want to know who he is. I just want him to be Han Solo.
Great actor. He's just a jerk.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't want to know him as a person. I just love his character. For me, even before we had the first 3 movies in the Clone Wars, which I think made this even bigger for me, there was always something for me with Obi-Wan. Mm-hmm. And so when Ben sacrifices himself so that they can get on the ship, and Luke is like, no, that scene for me, and of course we're younger, right? But for me, that scene, that like really got to me. And then now that we've had the first 3 movies and we've seen Clone Wars, and I love Ewan McGregor. I mean, he's just fabulous. And
I can't wait till Kenobi comes out.
Yeah, and him with Anakin and seeing all that.
It's not coming out?
No, I thought they...
No, it's coming out.
No, it's supposed to be coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's coming out next year.
So for me, Obi-Wan was a big one. And then, of course, Ben Solo. Not Kylo, but Ben. So there's a difference. But Ben...
how they did it.
How they did it.
It was kind of... When I was watching, it was kind of like what happened in Romeo and Juliet.
Kind of.
Some of the renditions that we've seen of that.
Yeah.
And it's just like...
And for me, Luke. Because I loved Luke. But... I cried when I thought that Kylo was shooting him and like that he was sacrificing himself, because I felt like that was that arc back to Ben. And since Obi-Wan meant so much to me, that his death meant so much to me, then to see Luke, and I was thinking sacrificing himself, which in a way he did, because he projected himself out and then let himself go. That I think impacted me. I think that like letting yourself go and to defend someone else, I think is a big story arc that just gets to me. It gets me in my little pitter patter. So
yeah, Ben Solo was pretty, but like leading up to it, it was just like it was phenomenal how he was coming back, how he changed as a character.
Right.
And then you saw it. You really saw it. He really
acted that well.
Really well. When you saw that switch.
But that's what's nice. But sometimes when I watch these characters, like we were talking about Lexi Gray earlier, who's now on Supergirl, like when I first started watching Supergirl, I was like, oh, sad, it's Lexi Gray. So sometimes, and I understand why these actors don't want to get typecast, because we do become so involved in their characters and we do love them, and a lot of times as fans we kind of think we own those characters, and then to see them be another character, it's hard for us to let go of.
And I think that kind of leads us into the series finale of Arrow, and that started a whole universe of DC television shows that I don't think any of us expected, and we didn't start watching Arrow until like the 2nd season. Yeah,
and I didn't always love it. I had my ups and downs with it. But really, Stephen Amell, right? Is that the way he says his name?
Stephen Amell.
Yeah, he was super great. In fact, a lot of the characters were super great in that. And I was really hoping, and maybe they still will, but I don't know. I was really hoping they would maybe do a spin-off of it with the kids. Because I really love the direction that they took with his daughter and with his son, and
they made a lot of nods to them possibly doing that.
I would really like to see that.
Within the show itself, not like outside talk, but there is outside talk.
Right.
But within the show, they do little nods to it.
And the tribute
like
at the
they tell his daughter that, oh, you have your own story.
right, right.
And it was, oh,
Maybe.
maybe.
But I thought that the tribute at the end was really great and really interesting because Steven's not really in it very much. It's mostly his life as viewed from everybody else who had a connection to him.
Yeah.
So I thought that that was a really sweet, really good ending for a hero.
Yeah.
He's kind of a hero slash anti-hero kind of, because he's not always good. He does kill people. So, but yeah, I thought that was a really spectacular. That's in a long time. That's one of the best endings I've seen. This week was a good week for good endings, I think.
The writers really put their heart and souls into that because they know we love that character.
And it was nice to see them bring Kara in and bring Barry in and make that continue those connections to those shows that they did all these crossovers.
Because like when they were doing the memorial, they didn't show any of them, and none of them were there.
Yeah.
And they were like, really? And then they were like, oh, well, it wasn't the funeral. And when they were at the funeral,
that's when everybody was there.
That's when everybody was there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I thought that they did a good job with that. But then that makes me think.
Oh, the Get Your Geek On says Arrow ending. It was a good one. Happy to see Diggle get the ring.
Oh yeah, and then I'm assuming that's going to be an offshoot too. Yeah. The thing though is about these comic characters, and we saw this in the Superman movie, and I'm sure those of us that have read comics for a long time, you know, you you would get all bent out of shape because like your character was going to die or whatever, but they never die. They always come back. So like I got all kind of bent out of shape when everybody was like, oh, Donatello, the Ninja Turtle Donatello died, right? And I was like freaking out. What? And I wanted that comic so bad just because I wanted to see what that story arc was going to be. I knew he was going to come back, and I kind of figured how they were going to play it out, but I wanted to see. So sometimes,
you were freaking out when you heard that.
I was freaking out. So sometimes it is good for your characters to die because the story is stagnant if they never do, especially if they're in these story arcs where there is danger and stuff. I think it kind of stagnates, which we always made fun of, like G.I. Joe and stuff like that, because they were always shooting but never hitting anybody. And there's a lot of Stormtrooper memes going around because they always shoot and never hit anybody. But I'm a big reader. So for me, the death of characters in books is even harder for me because I've gotten to use my own imagination and bring in, I think, components of people that I know and care about, and so I've made these characters my own. But you watched the Harry Potter movie. Harry Potter for me was the hardest as far as characters dying. Dobby, when Dobby the little house elf dies, because again he sacrifices himself to save Harry, and he gets the knife, and he finally gets to be a free elf, and then he dies. So that's like terrible. Obviously Dumbledore, because he's the mentor and the longtime teacher and the father figure that Harry never really got.
Snape.
So for me, Snape. A lot of people were like kind of glad that Snape died, but not me. Like, you learn how tormented he is and what his intentions are.
But you get that throughout the book, don't you?
But in small snippets, you're not sure until at the end.
You get it at the end in the movie.
And that's how the book is.
You don't get it through any of it through the movies, except the very last one in the movies.
And the book is kind of like that. It keeps you on the edge of... It'll give you a little snippet and you think, oh, well, maybe he's not that bad. And then you'll go, like, you know, for the rest of the book, and you're like, no, he's really terrible, right? And then you'll get another little snippet, and you're like, oh, well, that was kind of awful. Maybe that's not so bad. And then the book will go on, and you're like, oh, no, yeah, he's terrible. And so it kept doing that to you in the book series. And then when you find out, you know, what happened to him and how horrible Harry's dad was to him, and that he was in love with Harry's mom, and that, you know, he saw so much of her in Harry. And so you find out all these connections, and you're like, oh, sad. He really did love Harry. And then you go back and think about all the things that he had done, and then it all makes sense. And you're like, oh, he did that for that reason. He did that for that reason. And so it all makes sense. The other one that got to me was Fred Weasley. because the twins are like the twins, you know, they're the twins the whole time. They're the funny twins, you know.
Yeah, the twins.
They're the troublemakers, and then for one twin, I can't imagine a twin having the other one die.
Folklore says Sirius Black and Snape were the hardest deaths for me to take in the Harry Potter books.
Really? Because Harry has so much of a connection to Sirius, and he starts to feel like he finally has family and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know that I got a big enough glimpse of Sirius. I felt for Harry, but I wasn't necessarily like,
Yeah,
oh,
you felt for Harry because he didn't have a connection
to other people,
to
and
other
that was,
people
yeah.
like that. And that was his connection, and it was just like, oh, and you didn't necessarily feel bad for Sirius himself.
Right.
You felt bad for Harry because he didn't have that connection anymore.
Right.
So
And
yeah,
then
I
that
could see
happens to Harry so often, you know, again with Sirius and with Dumbledore and then, you know, Lupin and Tonks and so many of the people that he loved and kind of was his support system end up dying. But, you know, he still has Hermione,
you know,
and he
the
still
kids
has Ron.
reading anything, even after that, for any type of movie thing.
Because they complain every time we go to a movie, and they're like, that's not right, that's not right.
No, because I found out that Dumbledore died before the movie came out. That he died.
Oh, because we were talking about the books?
I was like...
You're like, you guys need to shut up.
Shut up!
And then a lot of people had problems with like all the characters that died in Game of Thrones because it was a lot of like main characters, like major characters that died.
Mm-hmm.
For me, most of them I was like, oh, good riddance. Okay, bye. Because it wasn't like Tyrion died.
But if Tyrion were to have been killed off,
then I would have been upset about that one.
Something.
I would have been upset about Tyrion. I never liked Daenerys, so I was like, bye. Bye, Felicia. In the books, when I'm reading the book, I actually was sad for Ygritte, the wildling that Jon Snow loves, because Jon has just had a hard time, and you just kind of love Jon, right? He's just that kind of humble guy that like does what he can for his family, and you know there's something special about him. They allude to it, but you're not quite sure. But then he meets these wildlings, and he gets to kind of like go live this free life, free of all of this negativity that he's been around so long, and all of the backstabbing and all the political stuff and everything, and you're like, oh, somebody loves him, and he gets to be free, and he's kind of out in nature, and you're like, woo, free spirit, and then, you know. So sometimes those kinds of things bother me too, is when a character is finally, and you know, that has to make the story go along too, right? The character can't be happy and successful and everything for very long. That's why in Disney movies all of their parents are dead, because like, you know, you can't have a good story arc without conflict.
So going back to Disney, now that Star Wars owns Disney, now that I think about it, Vader was a hard death for me when I saw that, and I think it was the same fact that you felt bad for Luke. They just brought him back to the light.
Yeah.
And then
like he just got him to like do
like,
something.
Save him.
Yeah.
Even though Jedi have healing powers.
Well, but Luke was a very young Jedi, and he didn't really know everything at the time, so that for me makes sense. That happened. I was trying to think if there were any characters.
Well, yeah, but even less so was Rey.
Yeah, but she was like more attuned to the Force. Like it was just like all around her, basically. Like she was just so, you know, electric with the Force. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah,
like it just
so is he.
It just seemed.
If you look through the books, so was he.
Was he?
Yeah.
But was he more reluctant in it? Like she just kind of let it flow through her and let it. She was kind of like the vessel for it. It seemed like, and he was more reluctant. Like I don't know that I really trust it. Like I feel that it's there. Do I really want it? He always seemed like the reluctant one. I don't know. That was the way I always felt about it. Well, what about in the Marvel universe? So with the film.
Oh yeah.
So
I
with
know where you're going with that one already. Wolverine, Logan, yes.
So well with even with just like the whole I was gonna go to Logan, but first, for me, Tony Stark. No, Tony Stark was mine.
No, Logan was even more than Tony Stark.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was hard.
That
Man, Logan was tough. It was
really tough. I was like, and then the girl.
Shoot, because again,
X,
it's when there's somebody acting against them, right? Who loves them and cares about them, and it's their anguish that you feel. Mm-hmm. That makes it even harder for you, even bigger for you, right?
Yeah, that one was more for me, but yes, Tony Stark was also a big one as well, but not as big as Logan.
Tony for me because of the way he said goodbye. Mm-hmm. Which is why, like last night on The Good Place, it was the way Chidi said goodbye that his impacted me the most. Because it was sometimes it's the way they say goodbye. Yeah. It's this revelation of peace. It's this acceptance of what they know is going to happen and that they hope that what they did in their time was enough. Right? Mm-hmm. And so and I think that's a hero story arc as well, right? Yeah. Is that I gave it my all. I did everything that I possibly could. All I can do now is hope that it's enough. I was wondering if you were going to start like singing Boys to Men, It's So Hard to Say Goodbye or something. But no, we went with Frank Sinatra. Okay. But like when the Infinity Wars, when Thanos is there and turns everybody to dust, that one didn't really impact me. I know a lot of people were like, oh, it was like so terrible when Peter Parker died and he turned to dust. He's so young and Tom Holland is so cute.
But you know who's gonna come out.
But I knew that they were all gonna come back. Well, I knew that they were all gonna come back, right? I knew that the Thanos thing was not like the end all be all of like I knew we were gonna come back from that. So for me, that wasn't it. When Tony goes, you know that Tony's not coming back from it. Like that's
it. They allude to it.
No, he's done.
What about Yondo in Guardians of the Galaxy?
Yeah, I didn't really have a big connection to him. Like he was okay, but I was like, meh.
Quicksilver?
No.
You didn't care.
Didn't care. And I wonder sometimes too if it's.
What about Professor X when he died?
Yeah. And again, but I think some of that too is because I loved Patrick Stewart as Picard as well as Xavier.
Which we haven't seen yet.
I haven't seen Picard yet.
We're going
but we will. Sorry, I have something in my eye. It's like agitating me. I keep picking in my eye. But something in my eyeball. Aside from my eyeball.
Although the fake Coulson death was pretty deep.
Really?
Oh, you didn't think so?
I don't know. I don't know. Why? Well, why did you think so?
Well, because he was like the one character that kind of glued the whole Marvel universe together to begin with. And I was like, oh, he died.
Oh, he's dead.
But then he didn't.
And then he wasn't.
I was like, it's a comic movie.
Right? It's like when we go see all these comic movies, we're like, meh, they're going to be back. Meh, they'll be back.
But some people don't know that.
Right.
Because some people don't read comics.
Right, so they don't know that.
They're like, really?
Oh, because didn't you say that Daniel cried over Superman?
Oh, God, yeah, he was devastated. There were all the little kids about... Because when did that come out?
Like 3 years ago?
It was like 6 or 7, and there were a whole heap of little kids, about 6 or 7 in the movie theaters, bawling their eyes out. Yeah. It's like, I'm the worst parent ever. I took
like, why did I take you to this?
I did. I felt really bad, and there was a little girl next to him, and that was crying. I was like, Daniel, it's okay. He's gonna come back.
He's gonna come back.
And even at the end, where
right, you see it kind of shake or whatever the earth.
He said, "Oh, he will come back."
Oh.
It's like, yeah, I felt bad at each talk. It was like the worst thing.
Well, and so your kid reacting to it is another thing. So we were talking about Disney earlier, and so when The Lion King came out, our oldest son, who's almost 30, good Lord, was a little boy when that came out, and he stood up in the movie theater when Mufasa dies. And he was like, no! And you're like, oh God, what have I taken my child to? Like, I've traumatized my child.
You took him to a Disney movie.
Took him to a Disney movie. Well, it was our middle son, Zach, who, when we were watching Harry Potter, he was so young, and when Quirrell dies, and then Voldemort is like in the, he screamed bloody murder. I mean, he was just screaming, ah! He was freaking out. I was like, good Lord, what is going on? I'm like, don't you know we don't like Quirrell? We don't care. But yeah, Zach was freaking out over that one.
What about Leia?
Okay, but that's a different kind of sad because you know that she as an actress died, and she was an unfortunate human being. So you feel bad for like, I felt bad for like her family and for like all these people.
But aside from her herself, what do you think of the character's death?
I don't. I mean, I felt sad, but
it wasn't as sad as
no,
Luke
I didn't feel as sad.
Han.
Yeah, and maybe it was because growing up, I was such a tomboy, and I didn't really relate to Leia. Mm-hmm. She was almost even though she was a main character, she was almost a background character.
Yeah, Mad Love Vivian says Aemon Targaryen's death was pretty tough.
Oh, really? In the books, the other one that even though I didn't really...
And we have the other Colleen watching.
Oh, hi.
She said, remember me? I haven't been on here for almost a year.
Oh, wow. Almost a year.
Keep watching.
So, remind me, Vivian, because I've forgotten his name now. It just went out of my head. Daenerys is not one of my favorites, but what is her husband's name? Her first husband, who their child dies, and that's when she becomes the mother of dragons. When he died, because of what she goes through. That was the first time I really cared about her as a character. Was for her to go through all of those losses, mm-hmm. and to come out at the other side. And now I can't remember his name. It just went right out of my brain. Bert. I was trying to think if there were any other TV series.
Even though I met George R.R. Martin before she did.
Well, but I still met him. Okay, I was a,
but I didn't,
dithering idiot.
I talked to him
and didn't go there.
I was coherent when I talked to him.
You're real funny.
Khal Drogo.
Yeah, that's it. Drogo. Thank you. But again, you needed that death to move the storyline along. Yeah. So I think sometimes I just look at it, I guess because I've read enough stories at this point, so now I kind of look at it as... But there are some shows, when This Is Us ends, I think that show is going to impact me, because it already does sometimes anyway.
Every week.
Mm-hmm.
It does.
And I think a lot of that, too, is because I lost my dad. Mm-hmm. And so I feel that connection to them. And so that... I think anytime we can make a personal connection to something, that impacts us more than other things. I was trying to think if there was any other...
me watching some of that stuff, I tear up on This Is Us.
Major death?
No, any other TV shows that I felt like it... Because there was a whole list I had in my head before we started the show, and I feel like I'm leaving some out.
This says main character deaths are the best deaths.
Well, they are, because you do need that in order to kind of make this story more realistic to you, mm-hmm. basically.
Oh, yeah, the one that got me the most, and I'm going through a list here and looking at it go, and the one that really got me, Mr. Hooper, when he died on Sesame Street.
Oh, on Sesame Street?
Because he really died.
Because he really died.
And then they had to explain to the puppets why he wasn't there, and I was like...
You're like, oh, I don't want to do that anymore. But shows I remember some of the shows that ended too soon. And one of them I was surprised that got picked up by another network was Lucifer. Because again, Lucifer was kind of in the midst of its story arc, and then
Yeah, and when that stopped, I was like, no!
Whoa! Yeah.
And it was a heroic end.
Yeah, it was great.
That ended well.
It did, but I wasn't ready for it to end.
I wasn't ready for it to, but it did end well.
Yeah. So I'm really glad that they picked that up.
Yeah, so glad that they picked it up.
Constantine is another one that I wish somebody else would pick up.
Yeah.
He
has
his little bits on
cartoon.
His cartoon and his bits on DC Legends of Tomorrow.
No. He has a cartoon.
So
I like how they gave us San Antonio some love.
Yeah.
With the Alamo.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there was another one I was thinking of.
Oh, Alien Nation. Hated that ending.
Oh yeah.
The movie or the show?
No, the movies were the show. They just cobbled together a whole heap of episodes.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I hated that only lasted, 2 seasons, I think?
Yeah. Oh, Defiance. Defiance was another one that I felt like was just kind of starting to get into its groove, and you were starting to get to know the characters, and it ended for like no reason.
It just stopped.
What was another good one? Dollhouse.
Yeah.
That was another one where you were like, well, I thought we were doing good. What happened?
It's Joss Whedon.
Joss Whedon. Oh yeah, I forgot. Joss Whedon. Like, you know.
It was good, yeah.
He needs to take on a new name so that when he does all these shows that they'll stop. Can somebody go like put some sage around him or something, because his shows are good.
Shows.
Yeah.
And you're like, why did that end?
Yeah, it's crazy. Because I've never known.
And they're not shows that are like super cerebral or anything.
No.
They're very entertaining.
Boston Legal was another one too.
Yes!
Oh,
Yeah. Boston Legal was so good.
I was like, yeah, what the hell?
Yeah, I used to love the way they would sit out there at the end of the night and with their cigars and everything, and that was a great show. That was a good show.
And I kind of like how they ended it, but they ended it like they were gonna spin off. Because they kept making nods to that.
Yeah, and then it didn't.
And they never did anything with it. I was like, no!
Well, thankfully, now with Netflix and Hulu and that, a lot of the shows do get like a second life. And they do come back. Like Lucifer's one, Arrested Development's another one.
Yeah.
Veronica Mars is another one that it's like, oh, but now it's back.
And now it's back, yeah. One show, and this is old and this is not necessarily a geeky show, but one show that I really loved the ending to that I felt like just did it right was MASH. I don't know if anybody else watched MASH.
Are we getting some weird stuff on there? I'm getting like a gray screen.
That's just you.
Is that your pewter?
Maybe.
I don't know. I watched MASH growing up with my parents, and then loved, Hawkeye and Honeycutt and everybody and Burns and Charles.
Yeah, it was a good.
And I thought it was a really good ending that you just kind of.
It really was a good ending, although they did try to bring it back, and that wasn't so good.
Yeah, that's not. So, and again, some of these shows need to know when it's time to just quit. It's okay sometimes. Like, we don't want to let go, but it's okay.
They're getting a gray screen.
They're getting a gray screen?
Yeah.
I didn't do it. I'm sitting over here. I didn't do it.
Yeah, it's something weird where I that, and then but it's reconnected. Also, I don't know. Keep going.
It's Time Warner, Spectrum, whatever it is now. It's all their fault.
You know the one that kind of when it came back, it was like yay, and then they didn't do anything with it, and then they ended it really, really, really awfully, and I just hate it now. X-Files.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, yeah, and I thought the new revamp of X-Files, like, I was kind of starting to get into it, and then...
Yeah, when they brought in the Einstein and... God, I forgot the other character, which was kind of the reverse opposite of the Mulder and Scully characters, I went, I see where they're going there. And then they had this whole alien thing.
And then this whole thing, and it was real...
I don't care.
Yeah. That's kind of how we felt about it, too. We were like, we'll just pretend we didn't watch that.
Would have been great if I hadn't watched the last episode.
When we were kids, do you remember how The Greatest American Hero ended? Because I feel like that was on for a very short amount of time and then was like gone.
But I don't even remember.
But that was another one where I remember my parents watching it with me, and we were like, "Oh, this is like a really great show," and then you're like, "Hey, what happened to that show?" Well, and that was another weird thing that I think that people that didn't grow up in our generation don't understand is like you went. And it was like the next week there was a show, and the next week there was a show, right?
Yeah.
And then there was the summer break, and then there was the Christmas break, and then they would come back, and then you were like, are they coming back? Like, when are they supposed to come back? And then I don't know if they came back. So you would get kind of lost. It's not like now when you can just binge watch every episode back to back and just be like. But then I think that's a different kind of loss when you've like watched them all back to back to back to back, and then you have to go a year and a half with nothing. So it's crazy.
Yeah.
Are we still getting the gray screen of death?
Yeah, we're still getting the
Oh,
gray screen
no.
of death,
Okay, well, that's okay. We'll go to dinner.
but thanks for checking us out. They're not going to be able to see us.
Yeah, they will when we maybe go off.
Maybe. But
Maybe,
we're not
hopefully.
saying goodbye to us. So, gotcha. April Fool's in January. February. Whatever it is. It's January. The longest month ever.
So thanks for checking us out. I'm Vince.
I'm Colleen, and that's Stuart. Geek
Geek
out,
out,
SA.
SA.